Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Brady, I'm a therapist, and today I wanted to share with you 3 characters that I would love to do therapy with. On this channel, I tend to apply my skills as a therapist to different fictional characters across different mediums. But today I thought it would be cool to just talk kind of casually about 3 characters I have always found interesting, and in broad strokes, what do I think it would be like to do therapy with them. So the first character that I would absolutely love to do therapy with is none other than Kratos from God of War. If you're passionate about the work that you do, it's probably because there's some part of it that presents a sense of challenge to you. In my work, the cases that I often find the most rewarding are often the most challenging. And I think that Kratos would be someone that I have a very difficult time, first of all, just convincing to talk with me through some of these things. He's someone that presents as very closed off and very guarded about his emotions, which to me does not mean that there's not a lot of emotional content there. It's just that he's found a lot of very good ways to protect himself from actually accessing them. So just for context, I'm not like a God of War series master or anything like that. I've played the first game on the original PlayStation 2, and I have played probably one of the games that was on PSP. I'm not sure which one. And most of what I'm sort of bringing into my picture of Kratos as a character comes from the 2018 release. Kratos would be someone who I find very interesting to work with because of how much work he has done to sort of suppress his own emotions. First of all, I think it would take a lot of convincing up front just to get him to agree to the idea that therapy is not only worth doing, but that I am someone he can trust to actually work through this process with. That's something that I actually do have a lot of experience with in my professional practice is, working with people who may be court ordered to be in therapy. And a lot of times they just don't really want to be. And that comes from a very real place, right? Here I am as someone who is telling them, like, I want to help you and I have no other motive than to work with you on solving some of your biggest emotional challenges. It sounds too good to be true for a lot of people. And so a lot of my work with people of that population is in kind of building rapport with them, getting them comfortable talking about things that they may not have shared with anyone else, and that due to their upbringing or their circumstances has conditioned them to feel that being vulnerable is a sign of weakness. This is something that I think would be pretty challenging about working with Kratos because he has a lot of issues, specifically how he deals with anger, or I guess doesn't really deal with it so well.
There it is!
Hold! What are you doing? Now his guard is up. Only fire! Only fire when I tell you to fire.
I'm sorry.
Do not be sorry. Be better. Find it.
What I see with him is that demonstrations of his strength and ability to overcome any sort of like external conflict is how he shows to himself and to the world that there is no need to be vulnerable. This produces results. And so there is a very strong association between power, authority, control, and influence. And it's not my place to tell him he's wrong in that. But where he's coming from in the narrative of the 2018 game is he's trying to show his son Atreus a different way to live. There is this very complicated difference between who he was and who he's trying to portray himself as to someone who is very young, very impressionable, and is looking for guidance to how to manage their own emotions. And so I can imagine a lot of the work that I would do with someone like Kratos being about how do you reconcile this person that you used to be, this violent, angry, vengeful individual whose entire personality has been shaped by overcoming this conflict through brute strength, with the side of yourself that you're trying to present to your son, who is a lot more composed, reserved, and is capable of actually finding strength through sensitivity and vulnerability.
Close your heart to it.
This is not too dissimilar, actually, from work that I'm doing right now with people who have come from the criminal justice system and who may come with violent pasts and are looking for ways to make amends from that. Many times, this is a process of learning self forgiveness and realizing that the way you view yourself does not always have to be an all or nothing situation, that life is really complicated. And if we trust that people have the capacity to change, which I very much believe they do, means that we may never find a way to balance the weight of our actions equally. It's a really complicated and emotional subject, and it's something that I feel like would be really difficult for him to open up about. But that's why I think it would be such an interesting case to work on, because it would actually be really difficult to help him find that very narrow target of peace with himself. So, the next character that I would love to do therapy with, this one's kind of obvious. It's Batman. Has there ever been a character more deserving of therapy than Batman? I mean, this guy is the definition of a tortured personality. Again, I know there's like a million Batman variations, but the ones I'm going off of are the ones from the animated series and The Dark Knight. So that's the ones that I'll kind of talk about here. But yeah, Batman, what can I say? I mean, he's created a whole other personality, identity to sort of protect himself from the darker parts of his psyche. And he is able to, in one sense, see himself as the benevolent, philanthropic Bruce Wayne and separate that completely from the violent and vengeful Caped Crusader. I think the therapy would be so interesting with him because there would always be two sides to things. Like if we're sort of working on the subject of processing grief, for example, like how does Bruce Wayne process grief? How does Batman process grief? It would be totally different between them, right? And I think that this very defined separation between the part of himself that takes direct action to sort of get his emotions out physically and viscerally versus the side of him that may deal with them with a little more sensitivity. I think one of the biggest challenges with him would be the fact that in both cases, he has to keep some part of himself private. And what does that do to your ability to actually like deal with some of these very important mental health issues of loneliness, of isolation, of grief, of regrets? In the versions I've seen him depicted, there's really very few people he gets to share his full self with, both parts of his identity. And provided he understands that, you know, what's said in therapy stays in therapy and he feels trusting of that process, he may be able to finally start to address some of the issues that he has separated into these two very distinct lifestyles into one sort of cohesive picture of his overall mental health. So again, this would be like one of the most challenging like therapeutic cases of all time. So that's obviously why I would think it would be really cool to do therapy with Batman. And lastly, I mean, there's like a million characters that I would love to do therapy with, but for the sake of this video, I wanted to pick three of the main ones. And another one that I thought would be really cool to sort of work with in the process of therapy would be Ellen Ripley from the Alien series. So I'm a huge Alien 1 fan. I like the other Alien like broader franchise, but Alien, the original film, is just one of my favorite films of all time. And to me, one of the reasons that I am very fascinated by the depiction of Ellen Ripley in that film is because one of the markers of how I sort of like build my psychological framework around someone and how I sort of start to work with them through their issues is I often wonder like how does this person react to sudden and unexpected changes in their lives? Because we all have like coping skills and defense mechanisms and ways of perceiving the world that develop out of life experiences, and we put a lot of practice into refining them over time. But to me, the true measure of someone's character is often how they respond in situations where the stressors are completely unpredictable and we are pushed to the extreme limits of what we are even able to do to react to them. Ellen Ripley is a character who is put in a horrific situation and has to incur an incredible amount of loss. And I think that that would make the process of therapy with her very unique. And I guess, unlike the other two characters that I talked about in this video, I feel like Ellen would be someone who is a lot quicker to open up about these things. Like I said, I love a good challenge, but sometimes I prefer the challenge to be in the depth of the psychological work rather than in working through the particular resistances of the person I'm working with. I feel like Kratos and Batman would have a hard time just attending to the basic process of therapy, opening up about emotions, learning how to describe what they're feeling, and trusting that I'm someone who could even help them through these things. To me, what has always resonated with me about Ellen's character is how earnest and empathetic she is. Despite not really having the closest relationships with all of the people that she is aboard the Nostromo with, she does go to great lengths to protect them. And so I imagine the process of therapy with Ellen, again, kind of like post-alien, pre-aliens, being one of post-traumatic stress and survivor's guilt. These are, again, very complicated subjects to work through in therapy. And a lot of times, my work with people who have suffered from some kind of PTSD is that going through a severe trauma like that has reshaped a very foundational way that they organize the world. Whether that trauma is related to relationships, whether they can trust people, whether they can ever feel safe again and not always feel like they have to be on edge or on the defense. Something has happened to them that is very difficult to unroot because it has become so ingrained in their worldview and is followed by their patterns of behavior. We know from the sequels that Ellen does have nightmares and flashbacks of these events, and that there is a kind of loneliness in feeling like no one else is truly going to understand quite what I went through, how difficult it was, and how much it has shaped everything about my personality going forward. So these are core issues of identity and just totally learning to reshape how you view the world and basically trusting that you can have good experiences again, that safety is not something that you are never going to have the privilege of after the fact. It would also be really difficult. So maybe this says something more about me than the characters, that the three characters I said I would love to do therapy with are all like really challenging and all have to do with issues of conflicting identity and that sort of thing. So Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that says about me, but there you have it. Those are three characters that I would love to do therapy with. So yeah, it was fun to talk about this. I have a lot more to say actually on not just these three characters, but I mean many, many others as well. There's so much I could say about like what kind of approach would I actually use with someone like Kratos? What kind of approach would I use with Batman, for example, right? Like I would probably use some very gestalt sort of methods, like empty chair, kind of having one part of yourself communicate with another part of yourself and kind of breaking down the dynamics that we see. There's a lot I could go into there. So let me know if you would like to see independent videos about like what would therapy with Kratos be like? What would therapy with Ellen Ripley be like? I could break down some of those things for you as well. And if there are other characters that you think would be interesting to hear a therapist's perspective on, feel free to let me know in the comments, and I would be happy to talk about them. With that said, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.